Good evening. You are just in time for a very interesting conversation talking about climate change and the space for young people, African young people in this conversation as we go into the Africa Climate Summit. My name is Zainab Wandati, and I'll be taking you through this discussion for the next 1.5 hours. And we'll also have some views from the young people in Kisumu, in Kwale, and in Isiolo as well, to chip into this conversation, and you get to hear what are their youth perspectives when you talk about climate change. What do they want to see coming out of the Africa Climate Summit? Now, this particular conversation is centered on the Africa Youth Climate Assembly, which is, you might call it a precursor to the Africa Climate Summit or a spin-off of the Africa Climate Summit. And to get this conversation started, I'd like to introduce my panel. We also have a live studio audience, by the way, who will get to interact with a bit later in this conversation. But right next to me, we have Dennis Wakaba from Ron Electric. Karibu sana, Dennis. Please pick up your microphone. Thank you. Next to Dennis, we have Alphonse Muya, who is the coordinator of the Africa Youth Climate Assembly, and he'll be telling us a little bit about why the Africa Youth Climate Assembly needs to happen and what it is and what they're trying to achieve by bringing African youth together in this assembly. And then next to Alphonse, we have Tracy Kimathi from Baridi Solar. Tracy, I hear you're doing wonderful things with your Baridi Solar. You'll tell us a little bit about that. And then last but not least, we have Jeanette Gitobu, who is a professional in wind, actually, a woman working in the space of wind energy. And she'll tell us a little bit about what that's like for a woman in a male-dominated field working in the space for wind. Now, welcome once again. My name is Zainab Wandati, like I said. You can interact with us online at Zain Wandati, at NTV Kenya, and the hashtag to use is on your screen, AYCA 2023. And on sign language interpretation, we have David Agondoa tonight. Welcome. So I'd like to start with you, Dennis. How are you doing this evening?
Feeling good, because we are talking about us.
About young people,
finally.
Finally, someone talks about young people.
Exactly.
How do you feel about being a young person working in the space in climate?
I would say if we don't take time to concentrate on climate action as youth, because when we cross that bridge, it's us to feel the impact, and also our children also to feel that impact. So when we have energy, when you have that zeal and passion, we have to do what we have to do, especially when it comes to my space, which is electric mobility. I want every young person to go zero emission in daily drives, and more so getting into green jobs of participating in that space. Yeah.
What happened? What are some of the... Have you felt any of these climate impacts directly in your life that you might say drove you to find a solution?
Certainly. My story runs all the way from high school when I started to design electric vehicles from scratch using Science Congress. And later on, I was traveling on a road, then one beautiful bus came and spewed a lot of black smoke on my face. Ever since, the lung movement initiative started. Yeah. So my role and getting into the green space is to find solutions so that nobody else faces the conditions that I faced, especially when it comes to the suits that we have within the city, so that, and especially for buses, go to electric.
Put a pin in that, and we'll come back to that bus that you said spewed a lot of smoke to you. Alphonse, the AYCA is trying to bring together at least 60 countries, and you're bringing them all here to Nairobi to talk about this climate problem. What is your ask as AYCA?
Many things, Zainab. Thank you for actually having us here to speak about this, giving the Africa Youth Climate Assembly such high level of prominence. I think, just as Dennis says, I will also highlight that it is now or never, it is us or no one. It's our future that we have to create, and it's the future of also the next generation. We've realized that, we've had a lot of interactions with the generation ahead of us, and every time some of them actually really show contrition. I'll speak about the contrition because there are some of them who give apology without contrition. Of course, we know who are those. But of course, we've seen others who are really sorry about what their generation has done, and in terms of driving the planet to where it is right now. It used to be, you you remember those times when 1969 they spoke about the moon landing.
1969.
No, they spoke about moon landing, and they say, well, the picture of Earth was taken from the space, showing a beautiful blue planet. Right now, you've seen figuratively what images are written about the planet. It's like something that is at the verge, teetering at the brink of collapse. And we are like, well, now young people are working really hard to have a future. Now, if they don't have a place to live, what is the point of working so hard? So to respond to your question about like why is it this ambition, and what we need to ask is first to ask to have a livable future. That's not an excuse. We have to deliver a future, because they say whatever we have right now, the planet that we have right now, we've not inherited it from the past, but we've actually borrowed it from the future generations, and we have to bequeath the future generations in a way that it's actually livable. So that's the primary ask that we have. But then coming to the Africa Climate Summit, you've seen that the narrative is now shifting from positioning Africa as people who are known to be complaining, people who are now, like every other time, just lamenting about...
Serikali's idea.
Yeah, exactly. Serikali's idea. We have to shift from that kind of a narrative to showcase a continent that is endowed with a lot of minerals, endowed with a lot of potential, endowed with young people. Actually, young people are one of Africa's biggest resource. It's actually Africa's population by 2050 should be double, So what does this mean? It's not supposed to bring sustainability challenges, as some of the people argue in some quarters. It's actually a resource that we have to tap into.
Let me ask you this. Are you going to be blaming anyone for the climate crisis?
Of course. I mean, as I was saying, this discussion about...
Because you mentioned 1969 and the photo of the planet then, and then you mentioned what the planet looks like right now. So you're going to be blaming, do you want anyone to take blame for it?
Well, I'll take you back a bit, Zainab, to tell you that when all these discussions about climate change, if you read about the history of environmentalism, you'll realize that even in 1972, when people were discussing about creating UNEP, for example, discussions about climate change were not clear that time. People are just talking about things like pollution, It had not escalated to, nobody thought climate will change in such magnitude. But then it started by, well, is it a hoax or real, Then science eventually proved that it's actually real. When now people spoke about it's real, then people started asking, so who caused it? Is it natural or anthropogenic? So people said, well, no, these things are natural, So science again proved that it's an anthropogenic challenge.
You mean man-made.
Yeah, so it's caused by human beings. Then another discussion came about which humans are we talking about? Then
Alfonso, you're using so many words to answer the question I asked.
No, I'm coming there,
Zena. To blame someone, yes or no?
I'm coming there, Zena. Now, which humans? There was everybody. Now, science again proved that Global North has actually contributed the most to this challenge that we are having. So it's actually out there that Africa has done almost nothing. It has suffered the most. And that's a fact.
So we will come back to you because you're not answering that question. And Tracy was laughing when I did ask you that question. So I wonder if in her mind she's blaming anyone for it. But Tracy, you're working in the solar energy space, and you're providing a solution for maybe tell us a little bit about your solution. What is the problem you're trying to solve?
Absolutely. So with us, I run a company called Baridi. We work with solar-powered cauldrons. So we're kind of in that mix where we're in the food and energy nexus. I remember when we started this company, we saw drought-stricken northern Kenya, Marsabit. We saw, masses of animals and livestock being absolutely driven into massacre, absolutely being wasted. And so we introduced this concept of solar-powered cold rooms so that we can be able to utilize an abundance of resource, which is the sun, to be able to preserve meat, which is one of the driving economies of the northern Kenyan people. So what we're doing is we're using renewable energy, not just to curb, climate change mitigations, not just to reduce CO2 emissions, but to also drive an economy and to make sure that productive use is being used from solar. Solar can be used for lighting, but it can also be used for cooling, for drying, for, massive industrial and commercial purposes. And that's what, Baridi is coming in with our solar-powered cold rooms. We put these cold rooms in markets here in Nairobi, like Bama Market. I'm sure you've heard of it.
Yes.
We've been able to preserve hundreds of thousands of kilograms of meat with the sun. So it's not just a matter of us coming in to reduce carbon emissions. Of course, that's one of the impacts, but maybe even more so to develop an economy with this abundant resource in Africa, which is solar.
How long have you been in existence?
So we've been existing since 2018, trying to tweak here and there our ecosystems, but we really started in December of 2021. We've been able to put in 3 solar-powered cold rooms. These are massive, capital-intensive units, but again, where we're able to even save on electricity costs because of solar. So again, I just want to reiterate, renewable energy, yes, it comes in at an impact of reducing emissions, but it also really comes in revenue generation as well, and the youths need to wake up to that.
Mm-hmm. Great. Now, Jeanette, you work in the space of wind. While Tracy harnesses the sun, you harness the wind. Tell us a little bit about that as a woman, especially a young woman in this space. What's that like for you?
That's a great question. And similar to what Tracy has said in her sentiments, wind, solar, hydro, geothermal, these are all renewable energy solutions to the current climate crisis that we are currently all experiencing in the world. In the wind sector itself, by the nature of wind being available to everyone, it is a resource that we can now exploit and utilize to ensure that we're able to ensure the future of over 52 million citizens here in Kenya alone and around the world, ensure that we're able to create sustainable and reliable sources of electricity for everyone around. As a young African, it bothers me that on the African continent, 500 million people, close to 500 million people don't have access to electricity. We have to do something about that. And if we're going to talk about what was also mentioned before, the question about the next point of growth on the African continent is coming from here. If you look at the population growth by 2050, the majority of the workforce will be coming from the African continent. I believe there's a statistics that says about 70% of the African continent is 30 years and below. We are the future, but we need to ensure that we are taking the actions now to prepare for that future, including sustainable cities, and when it comes to sustainable living. And that's now where the solutions of solar, wind come on board to be able to ensure that we're able to cater to that demand that is currently upcoming. Because what happens now as a consequence is as nations grow, as countries grow, as our people grow, we demand more from our governments and we demand more in terms of our usage of electricity. The consequence of that now is that if we don't choose clean sources right from the beginning, we are going to now have a challenge where, as we said, the global north, we're going to be emitting quite a bit of carbon emissions. Africa contributes only 3% to current global emissions. That's how little we contribute. Yet if you look at the effects of climate change, we are one of the continents that are going to feel one of the worst effects of climate change. So what do we do about that? Kenya, for example, if you look at our renewable energy mix in terms of how electricity is generated here in Kenya, we're close to 90% renewable. We are a case study. We're a leader on this continent in terms of...
Now we are number 7, actually, when it comes to geothermal power production.
Amazing. We're number 7 into geothermal production, renewable resources. So all of us come together, wind as included as well, to ensure that we're able to meet that future demand in a reliable and a sustainable way.
Now, just quickly, before we hear from the people in Kisumu, do you have to be an engineer to work in the space for wind, in the wind space?
That's a loaded question.
Okay, maybe just give us a simple yes or no. Are you an engineer yourself?
No, you don't have to be an engineer to work in the climate space. But if I can elaborate more.
Great. So you'll tell us a little bit about how to get started in that space a bit later. But right now, let's hear what the young people in Kisumu have to say about what climate change is doing to them in Kisumu County.
Lake Victoria, this is the second largest freshwater lake in Africa, and of course there has been a lot of challenges to do with climate change. And here I have a small panel of people who earn their living or do their daily activities here on the shores of Lake Victoria at Hippo Point, and they're going to share with us maybe some of their views regarding climate change and how it has affected them, whether positively or negatively. On my left here is Mr. Dominic Achiando, who is going to also share with us what he thinks about the changes in climate change, or those that maybe affect his life here as he operates on the shores of Lake Victoria. Next to me is Madam Christine Hadija. She's also going to share with us how her business, she's a fishmonger, and she's going to share with us how climate change has affected our business. And then on my far right is Titus Muli, who will also be telling us his thoughts on climate change. So welcome to the show, and let's kick this discussion rolling. Bwana Dominic, pengine tuanze na wewe. When did you start, or the first time you realized that there's some changes in the climate that are maybe not familiar with what you used to know earlier?
Kulingana saa hizi ile tunavyoona, joto imekaa katika hali ya juu. Unapata wale wanatumia samaki katika Lake Victoria, unapata ya kwamba saa kama hizi samaki imepotea, lakini mvua ikinyesha unapata samaki sasa inakuwa mingi. Kwa upande wa ng'ombe sasa unapata nyasi inakaa kidogo. Sasa zinahangaika, ng'ombe zinahangaika sana.
Christine, hebu tueleze tu kidogo kikazi. Kwanza utueleze unafanya kazi aina gani?
Mimi ni muuzaji wa samaki na ninachomea tu kwa estate.
Okay. Na sasa mabadiliko ya tabia nchi, pengine utueleze imekuathiri kivipi ama imeathiri biashara yako kivipi?
Sasa naona kama sio kama wakati wenye ilikuwa hapo nyuma. Imeniathiri sana kwa sababu hata ukikuja hapa samaki hakuna. Huwezi pata hii beseni hata kama ya 1000 ama 500, unapata ya 200. Na ukienda na samaki ya 200 hakuna chenye utapata hapo ndani, na bei yake pia imekuwa juu.
Na pengine tueleze aina ya samaki yenye ilikuwa hapo mbeleni na wakati huu, kuna mabadiliko yote?
Kuna mabadiliko. Tulikuwa na mumi, kamongo, ngege, mbuta, na sasa hakuna hiyo. Sasa ngege ni kidogo, mumi na haipatikani, hata kamongo haipatikani kwa sasa.
Titus, maybe you have been operating here on the shores of Lake Victoria for quite some time now.
Right.
And I don't know, these changes have happened as you watch.
Yes.
And maybe you just tell us briefly what is specifically that has changed, which you, as a resident of Kisumu, would say that has affected you negatively.
Well, actually, when this was all taking place, like 2021 August, when I could see the level of water rising up, it rose up to around 3.5 meters higher. That it was also displaced so many people and other creatures along the shorelines. And as we all know, that fish do breed in shallow waters. So fish production was so much affected, because even if we go around, we won't see any fingerlings around. So it shows that actually the breeding place was totally affected. And here on the fish production, it's like actually the fishermen are not getting enough catch. And also another thing I experienced on this, it's like we had something called upwelling. Upwelling, it caused the death of other creatures on the lake, like snail. We lost crabs, and also some fish. You could hear that some fish were found dead floating and all that. Yes. And even those people who were doing like fish caging farming, they also lost their fish because the temperature of water got up higher, so there was no enough oxygen for the fish in the water. So we lost so many fish and other creatures in the lake. So if we come on land, you can see actually even this climate change, it's really, it's not a story, no, it's really, because at time you'll see cloud gathering and we'll expect that it's going to rain, but it doesn't, it fails to rain. And at time you can see it's raining like maybe a kilometer or 3 kilometers away from where you are, and it rains on a certain area without coming on the other side. So it is really climate change, it's real. And also when I look at the temperature, like at time it can be so much humid, like around during nighttime. It becomes more humid up to around 2 o'clock, and then it becomes too cold until around 5:30 in the morning. So this is real, it's not normal like the way it used to be. Just like now, we cannot tell exactly whether it's going to rain or not, because before, when we could see hot sun or when we could see wind blowing heavily from the lake toward the land, we could predict rain. So,
real impacts of climate change on the ground there. You've heard from the people in Kisumu how they no longer have fish, they can no longer predict the rains, and fish species that have actually disappeared. Alphonse, I'd just like to get your quick reactions. Did you know climate change in Kiswahili is called mabadiliko ya tabia nchi?
Sorry?
Mabadiliko ya tabia nchi. You see, the people in Kisumu have taught you something new today. Climate change in Kiswahili, mabadiliko ya tabia nchi.
Yes.
At least you go home with a new one today. So what are your thoughts about what you've heard about from the people of Kisumu?
Yeah, I mean, these are people, some of them we call unsung heroes, people fighting the climate change. I mean, we now call it crisis these days. Change is such a fancy word. So they are fighting it from the front lines. And these are human faces to the climate crisis that we are living in. Some of the people who are like opposed to all this may have cushion mechanisms such that they can't experience these effects or impacts of this climate change. And actually my reactions would be something has to be done, and it has to be done really urgently. And that's why our Africa Youth Climate Assembly focuses on that. Hearing from all what they are saying, Dennis working on e-mobility. Look at what she's doing on Baridi initiative, harnessing solar to refrigerate and all that. Look at what she's doing, amazing works. So we are holding this platform as the Africa Youth Climate Assembly, not just to have another conference. I mean, not just to have another declaration, but we're having it anyway, but it will not just be any other declaration, but to ensure that this is a platform, we are holding a platform for them to benefit, to ensure that we spotlight these stories they are doing, the interventions they are doing, how young people across the continent are responding to the effects of climate change.
Dennis, as an innovator yourself, do you think it's possible to find an innovation that will help these fishermen on the Victoria?
I think, yes. You always have a solution to something, whether it's through left or right. But looking at whatever is happening is whatever emissions we're emitting, causing the global rise in temperatures, these are some of the impacts. You know, how fish survive within the waters, definitely the warming, and also the nitrification of the lake and everything going about it. So there are certain solutions that fishermen like Dominic and a good friend from UK said. Well, the initiatives, especially in e-mobility, to help those people, the fishermen, to use electric motorboats instead of petrol motorboats, that it's part of the contribution by them to make sure that there's more fish, because we are looking at carbon neutrality, and it has to drive either from the bicycle, motorcycle, 100,000 buses and matatus. If we emit less, definitely we'll try to reverse, and the earth itself has a mechanism of self-healing. Yeah.
So they could be unconsciously contributing to the problem themselves. They know there's a problem, but they don't know they are also part of the problem.
Yes, exactly. The problem is ours, and the solution is ours to find and to implement. Yeah.
Now, Tracy, your quick reactions to Kisumu.
Absolutely. So first of all, resilience. It's very clear that they understand what has affected them. The rising sea levels, the lack of indigenous fisheries. So this is all something that they have noticed and that they have gone into resilience mode in. And that's kind of what you're finding most of the people kind of doing. Within the fishery industry, it's actually very interesting because of the perishability of these fishes as well. You might, spend a whole day catching these fishes that have been affected by temperature, lack of rainfall, and then, you capture this and you still have a high level of suns that basically enable even more perishability of this unit. So, even in the cold chain, we've studied a lot of the effects of climate change. And we've come to realize that beach management units, mama karangas, the fishermen, they're very resilient in how they handle this. And one of the solutions is through technology. They can utilize technologies, whether through boats that are powered with, battery systems or cauldrons that are powered with wind, right? The indigenous people themselves have identified these problems, and it takes a group of innovators and young innovators like ourselves to really come in and say, where you lack in sustainable mobility, we can offer. Where you lack in sustainable preservation, we can offer. So what I've come to realize and what I've noticed is, they're very aware of climate change. They're very aware of the problems that it brings. And I think our panelists are very aware of solutions that we could come to them and offer them as well.
There's always this perception that people don't know about climate change. So you'll find when people are bringing solutions, there's always that tendency of copy-pasting a solution because of that perception that these people don't know. We are the ones who are coming to tell them what's happening. We are the ones who are bringing them solutions. How do you see a solutions mindset working out for the fishermen in Kisumu, especially in light of the field you work in? How can they harness the wind in the fisheries industry?
Well, I like the fact that you mentioned harness the wind, because one of the other low-budget solutions that could be would be going back to sailing boats, for example. But in terms of long-term sustainability, battery-powered boats would be another alternative towards creating a more cleaner environment around it. But for me, when I see the reflections from Kisumu, I see Lake Victoria, the Great Lakes, one of the prides of Africa. I am seeing people seeing and living the effects of climate change right now, in this day, in 2023. What I see is that people's livelihoods are being affected because of climate change. What I see is that we have an opportunity for each and every one of us to come together and do something about it. We here are representing different solutions that are available. I talk about wind. I'm a director at the Global Wind Energy Council, and I run the Women in Wind Global Leadership Program, sitting on the premise of gender, energy access, and climate change. What that does is that wind on a large scale is able to facilitate and support governments to ensure that they're able to provide clean and sustainable energy for their population. Whereas on the local level itself, we can now create we have talked about resilience by Tracy here. The next level now is adaptation. How do you now create adaptable environments for these individuals that are living the actual effects of the climate crisis?
Great. So that's a great point to take a break. And I should mention that Earthwise on Sunday looked at the impacts of climate change in the Lake Victoria region. And one of the things we were able to showcase was a solution from a group of young people, actually, who have come to realize that one of the challenges the Lake region faces, besides the rising lakes, is plastics. And we did an experiment. We sailed around with a trawler to establish a hypothesis, and we actually established that we were able to actually pull out more plastic than fish. We could count how many fish we got. So these young people are providing a solution that would try and rid the Lake Victoria of plastics. But when we come back from this break, we'll hear from Isiolo and from Kwale, and then we'll also take some questions from our live studio audience here at Strathmore University. See you shortly.
And we need 2 Royco cubes because iron gives you strength to sukuma yourself to be the best you can be.
Sukuma na Royco, kula sukuma na Royco, sukuma wiki na Royco.
Red Bull gives you wings.
Show off your best skin with Nivea Nourishing Cocoa Body Lotion. Now with 5-in-1 Complete Care. The deeply nourishing formula prevents your skin from drying with precious cocoa butter and deep moisture for smooth and healthy looking skin. Step out in confidence with our most complete care from the world's #1 skincare brand.
When it comes to pain, we only seem to talk about 2 sides. The pain you feel and the relief once it's gone. But what about the moment in between? When you're finally released from pain. That moment when you start to get back to ordinary, and ordinary feels amazing. Whatever pain you're going through, release starts here.
With Glovo unaweza order chochote na ukipata una celebrate na body yako yote. Because your tasty grilled chicken ikifika, weekend inaanza. Ingredients are your favorite recipe just in time. Na wakati keki inafika ndio sherehe inaanza. Because to get anything on Glovo deserves a dance. Download the app, order anything unataka na we track minute by minute mpaka ikufikie. Glovo, order anything, we deliver in minutes.
Welcome back. You know what you're not seeing on air is that we have an entertainer in the room. A nice gentleman with a guitar who's teaching us some very nice songs like how young people can stand up against poor governance, and also a song about climate change. And hopefully before we finish this show, we'll be able to teach you some of those songs. We could take maybe one question from the audience before we proceed. Anyone with a question? Okay. Oh, many questions. There are many questions. The microphone will come to you. Please keep your question short and straight to the point. Tell us your name and if you're addressing your question to someone specific.
Yes, I'm Abednego Kimutai from Elgeyo Marakwet County. And I got a question concerning conservation. In my area, there is cases of deforestation of natural forests, Embabut forest. So my question is, what is the initiative you are going to take to gap such a problem that has been encountered in such a remote area? I will be very grateful if you give me the directions and the ways on how such issue of deforestation in Elgeyo Marakwet will be addressed. Dennis.
Oh, you want Dennis to answer. But before you hand back the microphone, Kimutai, let me just ask you, one of the things we're here to do today is find solutions. Yes. How do you, as a young person from Elgeyo Marakwet, think that problem can be addressed before we hear from Dennis?
Sorry? Come up again. I didn't get you.
Yourself as a young person from Elgeyo Marakwet County, you've got a question about conservation and the deforestation in Elgeyo Marakwet County. You're a young person living in Elgeyo Marakwet, and we are here to find solutions as well. Yes. Do you have ideas on how that problem can be addressed?
Yes, I got some.
Such as?
Awareness should be created in our area, and maybe some of the youth groups with tree nurseries be brought into book so that they may be given the opportunity to regreen that forest.
Okay, thank you. So you wanted Dennis to respond to you. So Dennis, you had his question.
Great, and thank you, my friend from Elgeyo Marakwet. Yeah, it's right, and it's happening everywhere, not only in your county, but as youth. You know, there are many approaches. First of all, you've given a good solution. Start with tree nurseries. Youths can come up with CBOs, initiatives to start going into wherever the deforestation has occurred and doing afforestation. Secondly, we understand that most of our counties are agricultural in nature. So how do we encourage agroforestry? You know, you can mix your crop and also tree to increase that tree cover. So I think there are so many solutions, especially looking at open spaces and other derelict land. You can undertake reclamation either as a county or youth groups and any person who,
Have you had any such experiences where you are from, and have you been involved in any such interventions where you are from?
Well, being in Nairobi, yes, we've participated in so many tree planting campaigns, whether in Karura Forest, and it's part of increasing that tree cover. The government has now the initiative to make sure that we achieve 10% all the way to 20%, because it's part of climate change mitigation measure. Yeah.
Great. Tracy, one of the challenges that young people face in their quest to find solutions, young people are always coming up with all kinds of innovations, is scalability and access to financing. How did you navigate this for yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I think even, when you're talking about the Africa Climate Summit, you're seeing, a lot of investors coming in with grant-based financing, equity-based financing, debt-based financing. So when you're looking at the climate change realm, I would say, start on the grant level. Some of these mitigations, like reforestation, afforestation of indigenous plants, the president himself has, allocated government funding towards that. So I would say the first source, especially with something as robust as climate change and reforestation, regrowing, solar, wind, capital-intensive things that require consumer engagement. The first step is really government funds, grant-based financing. And then once you start generating revenue, then you can use your own profits to kind of scale.
Did you apply for any financing, and how did you do it?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, with Baridi and our solar-powered cauldrons, these are, high assets. They can go up to 30,000 USDs. And again, we went into climate-based funding. We really researched on climate-based funding, and the summit that is coming up, I'm sure, is coming in with a lot of investors, whether that's within the global north, who've basically promised certain resources within the global south so that they can mitigate, the already, emitted carbons. So again, these are all climate-based funds are available to us.
So young people need to know how to find them.
Absolutely.
Great. I see we have another question. Hi, sir.
My name is Stefan Waigwa, and this question is directed to Jeanette and Tracy. You mentioned earlier about the energy project that you're doing with solar. And you mentioned how the youth should look towards energy, not only to, for climate change reasons, but also to provide revenue. It's a great revenue source. So my question is more of advice. What advice would you provide in terms of, breaking that barrier for lending and, acquiring the appropriate amount of expenditure to actually, follow through with the project? Thank you.
Jeanette, do you want to take that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And in terms of what advice I would propose is that we as young people, the world is our oyster. We are the future, which means the opportunities are coming our way. However, the other part of that equation is we need to make sure that we are well prepared to handle those opportunities that are coming our way. So Tracy mentioned about grant funding, for example. Grant funding, in my opinion, is a great starting level to begin because it allows you to test your ideas, to test your skills, to test your limitations, to understand what is possible and what is not possible. Whereas the consequences are quite minimal when it comes to grant funding. Whereas when you have debt investors, equity investors, the risks and the consequences are much higher. So if you can practice and begin on that level, for example, and ensure that you're able to manage those funds, create a bankable project, create a project that has a business case, that you're able to show sustainability, it's able to scale, and you have a plan for the future in the long term. But the key word here is sustainability. Let it be a sustainable project that is able to also withstand the ups and downs of the business cycle, because those are part of the experiences that young people have to go through. So I think that for me would be my advice. Begin on the grant level, hone your skills, and then improve from there.
I'm concerned that the women in the room are not asking questions, but as you prepare your question, let's hear from the young people in Isiolo, and maybe the women in NEET will prompt the women in this room to also engage in this discussion.
Climate change is a global issue. Imeweza kuaffect the whole international, national and even county. Lakini hapa kwetu Isiolo, we are more targeted on issues of climate change. Tumekuwa na changamoto, mifugo zimeweza kupotea, maji zimekosekana, na pia imecause poverty among the communities. Kuna mtu labda alikuwa na ng'ombe kama 500, 200, mbuzi, yote imeenda. Amebaki ana kitu. County government iliweza kufanya pia intervention ya kuweza kupeana maji na chakula kwa zile affected areas. Na pia our county was identified as one of the county imekuwa kwa mambo ya disaster. Lakini hatutakuwa tunalia kila siku. Lazima tukuje na solution. Na hiyo solution ikuwe tangible solution. Solution number 1. Juzi president alisema kwamba Isiolo imeweza kuwa advertised, kuweza kupatiwa nafasi ya kutengeneza ile crocodile jaw ambayo iko pale Oldonyiro. Hiyo ingekuwa solution moja. Hiyo damu ikitengenezwa iweze kusaidia watu. Pili, watu wetu pia kuna wale ambao ni wafugaji na wale ambao wanafanya mambo ya agriculture. Kwa hivyo kama areas kama Kina, kulikuwanga na irrigation kubwa moja inaitwa Rapsu. Hiyo irrigation ingeweza kufufuliwa ili watu wetu waweze kuchange alternative for pastoralist to agriculture. Inaweza kusaidia. 3, kuna legislation na policies mingi ambazo ziko kwa county assembly na pia kwa national government. Na pia tuko na climate change fund. Ile changamoto iko ni co-funding ya climate change. Sasa tuko kama county tuko na department ya special program na department ya environment and climate change. Mimi nilikuwa naomba the executive, especially the governor, aweze kufanya coordination ya hiyo department mbili ili waweze kusaidiana hii mambo ya climate change iweze kupungua. Climate change imetuaffect na iko na sisi. Lakini lazima pia kama community ukuje na kitu inaitwa adaptation and mitigation. Nikisema adaptation and mitigation, wa make sure wameadapt the situation na wakuje na mitigation. Mitigation ni kama gani? Kama zamani jamii wa Borana, kabla kiangazi jakuja, watu wanajipanga, wanatengeneza hizi nyiri na hizi vitu zingine. Hiyo ni part of adaptation. Lakini communities pia kama they are not prepared, na county they have not give them the civic education, our people will still suffer.
For us to get a clean climate, we must have clean leaders, clean people, so that we get a clean environment. And ukiangalia funds ambaye zimetumika kuhifadhi mazingira, it's a lot, but there's a lot of diversion in that, because most of the focuses inakuanga kwa hizo miradi zingine. And our people, where you are, make sure that you care about the environment that you stay.
Now, what I like about this Isiolo clip is two things. One, clean people equals clean environment. And two, the gentleman kept talking about preparation, mitigation, and adaptation. And he also mentioned climate change fund. Climate change funds was one of the projects, adaptation projects that was piloted by the Adaptation Fund in a couple of counties, Isiolo being one of them, to pilot what adaptation at the community level would look like. And at least 500,000 people have benefited from this program. And because of that program, FLOCA, now there's the FLOCA project, which is domiciled in the Treasury and funded by the World Bank. It's also built on the success of the climate change funds. So at least 44 counties now have similar programs running in their counties to push for adaptation and mitigation at the community, at the ward level, and they are to set up ward committees, ward climate committees to get this going. So that's one of the things I liked about that Isiolo clip, that they mentioned what the communities need to do at the ground. But Alphonse, I'd just like to ask you something. You know, Isiolo is dry land, and one of the things the gentleman there mentioned was irrigation. And irrigation is always a solution we see being fronted every single time there's a drought, and especially for the dry lands. Is that where we should be focusing our energies?
Thank you, Zainab, for that question. I was actually in Marsabit 2 weeks ago, engaging with young people on consultations for this Africa Youth Climate Assembly. And we were receiving a lot of feedback on that end, like what can be done. And I really like this focus on not imposing solutions to people. They know their context better than anybody else. So if you allow them just to share what they want to happen within their context, then it's easier for them to own up the solutions. And I think all these consultations that we are running across Africa and Kenya here locally are all about that, people to voice out their solutions. So there's a project I'm actually heavily invested in called the Africa Great Green Wall Initiative, focused on Africa's drylands. If you look at the
Sahel particularly.
Yes, in the Sahel, it's now extending downwards. Just last month we were in Somalia. It got party to that. In the SADC region, it's also extending. Right now there are conversations about Kenya also joining it, because if you look at the percentage of Kenyans' landmass, a lot of it is dryland, you know. So we are focusing on creating value chains, for example. Not many people are speaking about that, which has a huge potential. If you look at dryland value chains, there is like millions, billions of dollars lying there. The other time they were speaking about, you see, baobab being uprooted to be taken somewhere in Georgia. But I come from Makueni myself, where we have a lot of baobab, and I took that initiative to start educating women about the value of these, they are dryland trees, right? Then we are trying right now to create value chain of baobab, for example, so that we tell people this tree has a lot of value while standing than cut, you know. So looking at the case of northern Kenya, I was there in Marsabit and I saw a lot of moringa, I saw a lot of acacia, you know, such things. So much as we may invest in water harvesting, which is very important, of course, there are other many solutions that we can look into in drylands. Drylands of Africa have a lot of potential. Great. Look at the amount of solar energy that we have in the northern Kenya, for example. It's a lot. So we need to tap into other things as well. Thank you.
I see we still have another question. Oh, still no ladies. Goodness. There's still no ladies. Please go ahead with your question.
Okay, thank you. Nganga Boniface Ndegwa is my name, and congratulations to the panelists for taking the lead and the milestones. As an innovator in the e-mobility and waste-to-energy space, how can you and other stakeholders, and for the sake of other struggling innovators, how can you and other stakeholders help in doing away with the many compliance requirements that hinder innovators in providing the solutions that, sustaining the solutions that they have already invented?
Okay, thank you. We'll take one last question and then we can proceed.
Okay. My question goes to the first panelist there. It's on the electric motor vehicles, boats, as you've said, and all those. I'll try to look into the future of the same. How are you planning to integrate youths, especially now that we have TVETs and all those institutions, to actually gain skills on how to sustain the program? You see, you are an engineer and you've done that innovation. What is your plan on sustainability and creating employment with the same? And the second question goes to probably Boniface. I come from Baringo County, where we are affected with the banditry. And if you look at the exact problem is on issues climate crisis because of drought, shortage of food, and now people are looking for greener pasture. How well can we incorporate youth that are engaging in banditry into this greening agenda to keep them busy and green their environment and at the same time bring peace? Because I believe there is a way we can integrate the whole thing to have peace, at the same time green the place, and at the same time engage the youths in those areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll take those for now and then we'll come back. So Dennis, you've been asked a question about e-mobility and the licensing and the certification required in there. Maybe you could draw from your own experiences to respond.
Okay, great. Good questions, and I will give it a context. Well, things have to be done within certain criteria, or the law or legislation, and it's good thing right now we have the e-mobility task force that is supposed to develop a framework, a policy framework to guide the sector. Yeah, that will help promote the innovation. We'll have places, tertiary institutions, whether TVETs or universities, housing research and development labs, to make sure that those innovations are up to standard and are applicable within the space. So I think once that is done and you have the required legislations, whether it's an act and regulations, I know Kenya Power, EPRA, the Ministry of Energy, Ministry of Transport are working hand in hand to make sure that we have this together, most importantly, Kenya Bureau of Standards, so that whatever is going outside there is standardized and works, meets its own use case. When it comes to the second question on jobs, green jobs, there are many opportunities. I could give a good example. Working with Rome Electric, we are 85% youth.
25.
85% youth, and our median age is about 28 years. So we are talking about people who have graduated recently and putting whatever they learned into practice. And we continue working together with other government agencies such as NITA and the TVET institution through the support of other donor organizations to bring on board expertise to be trained and go to the field so that when we deploy an electric motorcycle, there's somebody who can service it. When we deploy an electric bus, there's somebody who can maintain such a product. Because if there is none to do that, then the confidence of shifting to an electric vehicle is stifled. But green jobs across the value chain, whether it's from production, assembly, and also the sales and after-sales bit is most,
Thank you. And we'll discuss a little bit more about green jobs and what really they are and what qualifies to be a green job and what doesn't. And when we come back from this break, we'll hear from the last location, and that is Kwale County, to get to hear what solutions they are bringing to the table. Stay with us.
Acne's Creamy Wash is a foamy and gentle cleanser that removes sebum and dirt in the pores. Step 2. Acne Soothing Toner maintains skin pH. Step 3. Acne Sealing Gel quickly clears pimple-causing bacteria. The latent acne. clears, cares, and helps prevent pimple.
Warembo, ni nini muhimu kwenu mnaponunua body lotion?
Smoothness, scent, glow.
Nunua Nice and Lovely body lotion. Inai-transform dry skin kuwa deeply nourished na kui-smoothed. Na fragrance nayo. Wacha tu.
Now available in the 850 ml pack.
Chagua Kenya's #1 body lotion.
When you're finally released from pain, that moment when you start to get back to ordinary, and ordinary feels amazing. Whatever pain you're going through, release starts here.
Ataenda kucheza nje na hii baridi yote. Why did you let him go? Si atagonjeka.
Sasa asipofanya tizi, how will he win more trophies? To protect our family from germs that cause illness when it's cold, we use Dettol soap.
Dettol soap with germ defense gives you protection. When it's cold, germs are transferred in different ways, and Dettol soap's germ defense protects you from up to 100 illness-causing germs. Be Dettol sure.
Now introducing the new 125-gram Dettol soap at only 200 shillings.
Benefits of ordering with Glovo. Glovo allows you to order anything you want at the comfort and convenience of your home. Craving fried chicken or pilau or pizza? Easy and simple. Order on Glovo today. Glovo, order anything, we deliver in minutes. With Glovo, you order anything unataka, and when you get it una celebrate because kukuchoma imefika, na wakati keki inafika ndio sherehe inaanza. Order Glovo, will deliver in minutes.
It's the Premier League, all on DSTV. All the goals, clashes and moments. All of Rashford, Salah and Saka. All in the language of your choice. All in HD. Available on all these bouquets to choose from on all these devices. Dial *423# or download my DSTV app to get a DSTV HD decoder with 1 month of family for just 2,999 Kenya shillings. It's the Premier League on DSTV.
Ataenda kucheza nje na hii baridi yote. Why did you let him go? Si atagonjeka.
Sasa asipofanya tizi, how will he win more trophies? To protect our family from germs that cause illness when it's cold, we use Dettol soap.
Dettol soap with germ defense gives you protection. When it's cold, germs are transferred in different ways, and Dettol soap's germ defense protects you from up to 100 illness-causing germs. Be Dettol sure.
Now introducing the new 125-gram Dettol soap at only 200 shillings.
This is NTV.
NTV Tonight Headlines in association with NCBA Bank.
Tonight,
I'm coming. Let's go. Obviously, this is political, and you can see that I have been in the county for 10 years. No ESCC came to my office, even one day. And I have been away one year since I left governorship. Nobody came my way.
1.3 billion shillings graft investigation in Kakamega County. ESCC grills former Governor Wycliffe Oparanya and his wives. Was it a decade of dishing out deals? Also tonight,
where companies were coming together and agreeing and collectively fixing prices. They were setting timelines for adjusting the prices.
Stealing steel mills. 9 manufacturers fined 388 million shillings for cartel behavior. Details on this broadcast. Plus,
but he has a problem with being oversighted by plenary.
Are you willing to resign based on these issues that have been raised on this floor?
I believe, Honorable Speaker, that there is absolutely no sufficient ground that would cause my resignation.
Pursuing good governance or facing the wrath of scorned legislators. Kenya Kwanza MPs versus cabinet secretaries. We have context into the war in the ruling coalition. And
hili swala la mpaka ni swala nyeti sana hapa kwetu Mackinnon Road. Ni swala ambayo limeanza zamani sana.
10 years later and counties are still locked in unending border disputes. voter numbers, development and revenue collection causing the frictions.
NTV Tonight Headlines, in association with NCBA Bank.
In over 60 years of dealing with numbers, we've learned that the numbers that matter the most to you are the ones that matter the most to us. NCBA Bank. Go for it.
If you want to be free and live like a child again, why stress about germs? If you must worry, then worry about winning. Why worry about germs? When you come home, bring tales and stories. Why bring in germs?
Shield your families from germs. When Dettol is a part of every household bucket, then you and your family can stay protected from up to 100 illness-causing germs.
Everyday use of Dettol keeps my loved ones protected.
Can we understand an unspoken language? Itaweza sema habari ya asubuhi. Can it be a way to savor each moment? Sisi tunajua, it can start lifelong stories. Be the center of celebrations and so much more. The more the milk, the better the chai. Chai kweli ina Brookside Dairy Best.
Acne-prone skin? Marks? Stop. Try new Garnier Charcoal Serum with 4% AHA, BHA and charcoal. The first black serum with no residue. Clinically proven to reduce pimples and acne marks. New Garnier AHA, BHA Charcoal Serum. Approved by dermatologists by Garnier Naturally.
To protect our family from germs that cause illness when it's cold, we use Dettol soap.
Dettol soap with germ defense gives you protection. When it's cold, germs are transferred in different ways, and Dettol soap's germ defense protects you from up to 100 illness-causing germs. Be Dettol sure.
Now introducing the new 125-gram Dettol soap at only 200 shillings.
With Glovo unaweza order chochote na ukipata una celebrate na body yako yote. Because your tasty grilled chicken ikifika, weekend inaanza. Ingredients are your favorite recipe just in time. Na wakati keki inafika ndio sherehe inaanza. Because to get anything on Glovo deserves a dance. Download the app, order anything unataka na we track minute by minute mpaka ikufikie. Glovo, order anything, we deliver in minutes.
Welcome back. And while we were on break, we were entertained with the magic fingers and guitar strings of Douglas. Douglas kept us entertained with some really nice music. Thank you, Douglas, for keeping us entertained and teaching us about climate change through song. So I'd like to, finally, we have some women in the room who'd like to ask some questions. So I'd like to give them an opportunity before we get right back into the conversation.
Good evening. My name is Joel Ndungu, a lawyer by profession. On the premise that climate change is an economic problem rather than a scientific one, I would like to ask the business panelists. We say that people get business out of solving problems for people. So you guys are making money because you're solving problems for us, which is true. As far as solutions such as carbon capture storage is concerned, and mainly geoengineering solutions, how can we make sure that we don't really get into the vicious cycle of capitalism, just creating more and more and more, let's say, carbon plants and all these things, while really not solving the problem? And do you think it's an issue of law and policy, or is it that our social fabric is too damaged and too focused on capitalism and consumerism?
Are you directing that question to anyone specific?
To Dennis, Jeanette, and Tracy.
Oh, okay. There was another lady again with a question.
Good evening, everyone. Nangila Wafula is my name. I work with Green Generation Initiative. My question is to Alphonse. After this, what next? You have said that you want to make sure this is not a conference like any other. We just don't meet and talk and nothing happens. So what are you going to do different that will make this conference different from all the other conferences that have been held? And to the ladies in the innovative sector, you keep saying young people can just find grants and they can tune up their skills and they'll get like financial support. You make the whole process seem easy. And I'm sure so many young people are wondering why you're making it seem easy and it was never easy for them. So were you mentored, or did you just wake up and write a proposal and because you wanted to do solar or wind, it worked for you? Because it would be so much nice if you could actually break it down into realistic things that you people actually do, so that we can also be able to do it. It's one thing to tell us the opportunities are there and you're not telling us how to get them. Yeah,
Thank you. That is a really good question. And I'd like you, Jeanette, to answer that question.
Well, that is a great question. And thank you for calling us out on our names so that we can be able to break down what it actually took to get here. To directly answer you, it was a combination of many different processes to be able to get here. One lesson that I learned as a young person is that your network is your net worth. Even the person that is sitting next to you is a network that you can be able to lean on in terms of support. So you being in a room such as this, being in an environment where these discussions are being had, where you can be seen, is an opportunity for you now to network. So networking is one example of how to be able to utilize the opportunities there. 2, mentorship is very important as well, to be able to succeed and to thrive within this energy sector as well. For example, at the Global Wind Energy Council, where I work, there's a program I run called the Women in Wind Global Leadership Program that focuses on mentoring people and mentoring women, providing knowledge transfer, so giving women the skills and the knowledge to be able to ensure that they're able to thrive within this sector itself, in addition to also giving them the networks by our global platform, because we work across at the highest levels of policy and energy with the International Energy Association, IRENA. We also work with governments very closely as well, so we work at the highest level of energy policy, and using our networks, we create a platform that women and our members can be able to leapfrog now to move forward. But to give you more hope about the energy sector, using wind as an example, the International Energy Agency has predicted that renewable energy needs to triple by 3 times to be able to meet net zero targets by 2050. If you look at the current landscape, wind and solar alone across Latin America, Asia, Africa, Europe, all the continents combined, wind and solar alone generated 12% of the electricity around the world. And by 2050, we're going to be generating 40%. The Global Wind Energy Council has predicted that the wind sector alone can create 3.3 million jobs between now and 2050. And to answer your previous question that we had earlier in the discussion, you don't have to have a science-based job to have access to the wind sector, to the solar sector. We still need people in finance, we still need people in communications, we still need people in marketing, in HR. We all need all the business functions within the sector itself for us to be able to meet net zero by 2050. You just need the drive and the passion. We just need the drive, the networks, and you being in the rooms to ensure that you can take your own future in your own hands.
Great. Dennis, there's a question about capitalism. How do you ensure that it's not just one vicious cycle?
It's a hard nut to crack, but let me tell you, in terms of e-mobility solutions and also other innovations within the climate change mitigation and adaptation, you have people focusing and passion and all the time to make sure that it's impact driven. Yeah. Most of us exist here because we faced, and based on my story, we faced a challenge along the way.
To get a solution for it.
Exactly. So we stepped up, using our small resources here and there to make sure that there's a solution that will make sure that, again, that problem does not happen to anybody else. So I would say money must change hands, especially within the value chain, to make sure that the solution...
Otherwise, how will you earn a living?
Exactly. How am I supposed to create 100,000 jobs within the e-mobility space without paying for the quality, skill, or talent? Certainly, there is a balance, but we need to make sure that First of all, it's impact driven and making sure that we have the right solutions in place. Yeah.
Alphonse, there's a question for you, but I'll come back to you. I want to just put a pin in it. We'll come back to you, what next? But let's hear from the young people in Kwale what their thoughts are about these discussions.
Through this conversation, today we are in Gazi, in Msambweni constituency within Kwale County, and we'll be discussing matters climate change. But first, let me introduce my panel. Next to me is Dr. James Cairo, who's the chief scientist at the Kenya Marine and Fisheries Research Institute. Next to him, there is Pauline Mwangi, who's a student at Chuka University undertaking Master of Science in Environmental Science, and of course also just next to her is a village chairperson of the village, that is Gas Village, who's called Edie Bumani. Welcome to this conversation. And just to begin with you, Daktari, you're a champion of climate change. How is the situation, especially here in the coast region?
There are three major consequences of climate change. Of course, the increased aridity, the sedimentation, and then the sea level rise. But of all these, one that is impacting the coast and which we can observe is definitely the increasing sea level, whereby, and this is really aligned with IPCC prediction that by 2100, the sea level will have risen by 1 meter, which is a really big rise. So what we are doing as a National Research Institute is looking at which are these vulnerable areas that will suffer the consequences of sea level rise. And you can see them like in the Tana River, the Lamu County, the Kilifi County, and some lowland areas of Kwale. When the sea level, if the sea level prediction is right, so much will be submerged, the human population, the loss of property, and so it becomes really a concern.
What is the cause of this?
The cause of this is definitely the global warming. And the global warming is not only in Kenya. It's a global warming is a event happening all the world, whereby the ice caps in the Antarctica and the Antarctic moisture are thawing. Thawing is dissolving. I should say climate change is real. Climate change is not only for the developing country, and it's also for the developed country. And what we are looking now is the solution available to avert the climate change. And that's why we have this big African Climate Week that will be looking at finance, the climate finance solutions that are suitable for Africa.
You know, climate change is always this buzzword that people use, you know, and it's now the new thing everybody uses to make money. And you guys have found a way to use that word to make money by creating solutions. So as we go into the final moments of this discussion, I could start at the end with you, Jeanette. What is the one thing you want the young people to remember from you today in a minute?
The one thing. Truth be told, we all have to do our part to meet this climate crisis, no matter how small the actions really truly are. And the other part of this equation as well is that when it comes to young people, we are the first generation to feel the actual effects of climate change and the last generation to do something about it. Identify what you're passionate about. If it is wind, if it is solar, if it is hydro, if it is e-mobility, identify a niche within the energy space that you identify with, that you're curious about, learn about it, educate yourself about it, and get involved in that space so that you can ensure that you become a practitioner of a specific energy source, and that allows you to open up more opportunities moving forward compared to just being a generalized individual.
Great.
So niche, having a niche focus,
and do something about it.
Helps you to do something about it.
Great. Tracy, what is your key takeaway?
Yeah. My takeaway is make sure you also learn how to generate revenue with this renewable resources, find market demand, and always collaborate with stakeholders, because stakeholders will tell you what the problem is and then the solution will come later. So don't come and say, okay, you guys will all change, to e-mobility or all change to solar cold rooms, or always make sure that first you have market demand, then you try and fit the solution to that, and always make sure that you profitize or, sustainably run these renewable resources and these renewable innovations so that you can actually generate revenue and make a sustainable business out of it.
Great. Dennis, your key takeaway.
Okay, great. So I'll say this. There are many ways of doing things. There's no one solution that will help us mitigate or do adaptation. So it's upon each one of us in our small areas or big areas to do all the interventions, whether it's to do with the pruning of the issues on top or actual uprooting of the causes, because we need to look at the root cause of climate change and try attack in terms of mitigation and adaptation. So I think it's all about us going out there with solutions, with zeal, and as my co-panelists have said, the time is now, and we need to act and implement, and we are sure that Alphonse will make sure that this is a good and impactful, bankable and impactful conference. Yeah.
Great. Alphonse, you finally. What next?
Thank you. I think for the longest time, engagement of young people in even creating the future of our country and continent and the globe has not been meaningful enough. It has been very episodic and actually very cosmetic every other time. And I think what we need to do going forward, this Africa Youth Climate Assembly is a testament that young people can create the solutions themselves. This panel is a testament that young people are actually experts in their own rights. Glad to see actually Dr. Philip Osano in the crowd here, who has actually worked with us every other step of the way when we were trying to co-create the Africa Youth Climate Assembly being an idea to where it has been. Good to see John Kioli here in the panel as well, and such great inspirations around the room. It's a testament that what young people are creating can actually be taken to another step, and now we actually forge the future of our continent. So I wish to take this opportunity actually to welcome young people from Kenya and across the continent to the Africa Youth Climate Assembly that will be happening from the 1st to 3rd of September in KICC grounds. And we wish to showcase what young people have to bring to the table in leapfrogging this continent to climate neutrality and to sustainable development. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. You've mentioned all the things that are happening, and also the presence of Dr. John Kioli in the room. Dr. John Kioli is a member of the Climate Change Council, and labda usimame usalimie wananchi wa kuone. Tuko na serikali ndani ya nyumba. But leo sisi kwa kusema serikali saidia. Yes. So Dr. John Kioli is from the Climate Change Council. Now, you've mentioned the assembly beginning on the 1st of September. We also have something happening tomorrow and on Friday that again involves young people at the Sarit Center to get to hear these experiences of climate change from the children's perspective and the young people's perspectives, and what solutions these children believe exist in this space. And of course, the Africa Climate Summit itself coming up from the 4th to 6th, and the Africa Climate Week. We are about to get very busy. And of course, we'd like to encourage all of you to get involved in these discussions with accreditation. You can still apply for accreditation and come to the ground, to the KICC, meet these wonderful young people, meet other young people who will be there, and get to learn a little bit more about how you can help in this space. I'd like to thank my panelists tonight, Dennis Wakaba, Alphonse Muya, Tracy Kimathi, and Jeanette Gitobu for making time to join us in these conversations and also for the discussions. I believe there are still many other questions in the room. We can engage once we get off air. So many questions about exactly how you got to where you are. Those are questions we'll be answering. But as we wind up, I'd like to thank UNDP for making this conversation possible, and also the Swedish government for making this conversation possible and facilitating this conversation conversation, and we'll touch base again at the Africa Climate Summit and the Africa Youth Assembly. My name is Zena Bwandati. Have a good evening.